The smell of stale pepperoni and bleach is a specific kind of purgatory. It's the scent of given up dreams, of 2:55 a.m. on a Tuesday, of a life that has stalled out in the grease trap of a strip mall pizza joint. My name is Arthur, and I've been the lead and only delivery driver for Gino Slice for 3 years. 3 years of ruining the upholstery of my 08 Civic with the lingering odor of garlic knots and marinara. 3 years of praying that the tips would be enough to cover rent and the ever-growing pile of final notice envelopes on my kitchen counter. It was raining that night, not a gentle shower, but a hard punishing deluge that hammered against the plate glass windows of the shopfront. The neon open sign buzzed with an angry, dying flicker, casting a sickly red glow over the checkered linoleum floor. I was mopping, pushing gray water around, watching the clock tick toward 3 a.m. 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, and I could lock the door, turn off the ovens, and go home to stare at my ceiling until the sun came up. Gino was in the back, counting the till. Gino was a man shaped like a meatball, usually covered in a sheen of sweat and tomato sauce, always yelling about food costs, or drivers stealing sodas. But tonight, he was quiet. Unnervingly quiet. The usual clatter of pans and the muttering of curses were absent. Just the drumming of the rain and the hum of the beverage cooler. Then, the sound tore through the silence. It wasn't the normal rhythmic zip-zip of the thermal printer spitting out a DoorDash order. This sounded visceral, like a bone saw hitting metal. A long, high-pitched shriek that made the hair on my arm stand up. I stopped mopping. Gino, we're closed in 4 minutes, man. Don't tell me you forgot to turn the tablet off. Gino didn't answer. The printer kept screaming. It wasn't stopping. I dropped the mop handle, the wood clattering loudly against the floor, and walked behind the counter. The paper was spooling out, but it wasn't the usual white thermal paper. It looked older yellowed, like parchment that had been left in the sun for a decade. And it was hot. I could feel the heat radiating off it from a foot away. Gino, I called out, ripping the paper from the machine just to make the noise stop. The silence that followed was heavy, pressurized. I looked down at the ticket. The ink was wet, glistening in the red neon light. It wasn't black ink, it was a dark, rusty brown. There was no address, no customer name, no phone number. In the center of the slip, in a font that looked jagged and handwritten, were numbers. Lat. 41.6092N long. Unknown below that, a list of items. 1 times large pepperoni. No garlic. 1 times side of marinara. Cold. And then the instructions. Usually this section said things like, gate code 1234, or leave at door. This one read, do not knock 3 times. Knock twice. Wait for the heavy breath. Do not look at the moon if it is green. If the dog barks, you are safe. If the dog speaks, run. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. Real funny, Gino, I muttered, though my voice lacked conviction. Very spooky Halloween prank in the middle of March. I turned to throw the ticket in the trash, but a hand clamped around my wrist. I yelped, spinning around. Gino was standing there. He looked terrible. His face, usually flushed red, was the color of old dough. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, and he was sweating profusely, a cold, clammy sweat that made his skin look slick. He wasn't looking at me, he was staring at the ticket in my hand with terrified reverence. You have to take it, Gino whispered. His voice sounded like he had been screaming for hours. What? Gino, look at the time, we're closed. And this isn't even a real address. It's coordinates. I'm not driving into the woods for a prank. Gino's grip tightened. He was shaking. It's not a prank, Arthur. It's the contract, I thought. I thought I had more time. I thought they forgot. Who is they? The debt, Gino babbled, his eyes darting to the rain-lashed windows, as if expecting something to come crashing through. I promised them service. If I don't send a driver, they come for the owner. You have to go. Arthur, listen to me. They'll give you $1,000 cash. Right now. I froze. 1,000. 2,000, Gino choked out, reaching into his apron and pulling out a wad of greasy bills. Take the pizza. Drive to the coordinates. Drop it off. Follow the rules. Come back. Never speak of it. $2,000. That was rent. That was my car payment. That was breathing room. I looked at Gino. Really looked at him. The terror in his eyes was primal. He wasn't trying to screw me over. He was trying to save himself, and apparently he was willing to pay for a human shield. Fine, I said, snatching the money before my common sense could kick in. But if this is a drug deal and I get shot, I'm haunting your fat ass. Gino didn't laugh. He just shoved a red thermal bag into my chest. It was heavy, much heavier than a single pepperoni pizza, and a side of sauce should be. It felt like there was a bowling ball inside, and the heat. It wasn't the smell of yeast and cheese. It smelled metallic, like hot copper and ozone. Go, Gino hissed, pushing me toward the back door. Don't stop for gas. Don't turn on the radio in Arthur. If the road ends, keep driving. I stepped out into the rain, the heavy door slamming and locking instantly behind me. I ran to my car, tossing the heavy red bag onto the passenger seat. It sat there, ominous and slumping, looking less like food delivery and more like an organ transport. I cranked the engine, the belt squealing in protest against the humidity. I pulled out my phone and typed the latitude into Google Maps. The longitude simply wouldn't register. The phone kept auto-correcting it, trying to snap to the nearest road. Finally, I just typed in the raw numbers. Gino had scribbled on the back of the receipt. The pin dropped. It wasn't in a town. It wasn't on a road. It was in the middle of the Blackwood Nature Reserve, a sprawl of dense forest about 10 miles north of the city limits. A massive gray void on the map. You're an idiot, Arthur, I whispered to myself, putting the car in gear. I pulled out of the lot, the tires hissing on the wet pavement. I drove north, leaving the comforting glow of the strip mall behind. The streetlights became fewer and farther between until the darkness of the highway swallowed the high beams. I drove for 20 minutes in silence. Gino's warning about the radio stuck in my head, so I left it off. The only sound was the rain and the rhythmic thump-thump of the windshield wipers. Then, the GPS spoke. It wasn't the usual automated female voice. It was distorted, deeper, slower. Turn right now. I looked to my right. There was no road. Just a wall of dense pine trees and a rusted guardrail. Turn right now. I slowed down. My headlights caught something. A break in the guardrail. A dirt path, barely wide enough for a sedan, disappearing into the tree line. It looked like a service road for logging trucks that hadn't been used in 50 years. Weeds were growing waist-high in the center of the track. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing behind me but rain and darkness. I looked at the red bag on the seat. It seemed to have shifted position slightly, leaning toward me. I took a breath that tasted like stale recycled air and fear. I spun the wheel. The Civic bounced off the pavement and onto the dirt. Immediately, the sound of the world changed. The rain didn't patter against the roof anymore. It dulled to a mute thudding. The air pressure in the car dropped sharply, making my ears pop painfully. I glanced at the GPS screen. It didn't show the forest anymore. It didn't show the road. The screen had turned completely black, save for 2 words in bright red text. Arrival imminent. The transition wasn't subtle. It was violent. 1 second, I was bouncing over ruts and roots. My headlights cutting through the standard gray drizzle of a rainy night. The next, the world convulsed. It felt like driving through a sheet of ice water. A physical shiver violently racked the chassis of the Civic. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, fighting me, as if the tires had suddenly found traction on something that wasn't mud. My ears popped crack loud and painful, like an airplane descending too fast. The pressure in my skull built up instantly, a throbbing headache blooming behind my eyes. I gasped, swallowing hard to clear my eustachian tubes, but the pressure remained, heavy and suffocating. Then the sound died. The engine noise, the rattle of the loose muffler, the slap of the wipers, it all just vanished, or rather, it was smothered. It was replaced by a low, consistent hum, like the sound of a high-voltage power line, vibrating right next to your ear. It was a sound you felt in your teeth more than you heard. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt, but there was no screech of tires, just a dull thud. I looked out the windshield. The forest was gone. Or, not gone, but pushed back. The encroaching wall of pines had been replaced by perfectly manicured hedges. The muddy logging trail was now asphalt black, fresh, pristine asphalt that glistened under streetlights I hadn't noticed appearing. I was in a town. What the hell? I whispered. My voice sounded flat, dead, absorbed by the upholstery instantly. I rolled down the window, needing fresh air. The smell hit me first. Gone was the scent of wet pine and exhaust. The air smelled sharp chemical. It smelled like ozone that sent right after a lightning strike mixed with something rotten. Like sulfur or old eggs boiling in a pot. It made my eyes water. I leaned out. The town looked wrong. It was styled like something from the 1950s, but too perfect. The houses lining the street were identical colonials, painted in pastel yellows, blues, and pinks. Every lawn was cut to the exact same height. Every mailbox was polished silver. There were no cars in the driveways, no tricycles on the lawns, no lights in the windows. It was dead silent. Not quiet night in the suburbs, silent, vacuum silent. No crickets. No wind in the trees. No distant highway hum. I grabbed the red thermal bag. It was vibrating, a low rhythmic tremor against the passenger seat. I unzipped it just an inch to check the pizza. The heat that wafted out made me recoil. It was scalding. I looked at the receipt again. The coordinates had vanished. In their place, new text had bled onto the paper. Delivery 1 to 704 Oak Street. The resident is hungry. Do not accept a tip. I looked up. The street sign on the corner, illuminated by a flickering amber streetlight, read Oak Street. I was parked right in front of 704. It was a blue house. The windows were pitch black, like hollow eyes staring out at the street. The front door was bright red. Okay, I muttered, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Just drop it off, get the money, go home. I grabbed the bag. I stepped out of the car. The gravity felt heavier here. My legs felt like lead. I walked up the driveway, my sneakers making no sound on the concrete. The silence was oppressive. I felt like an intruder in a mausoleum. I reached the porch. I raised my hand to knock. Do not knock 3 times. Knock twice. Gino's instructions flashed in my mind. My hand hovered. I took a breath, clenched my fist, and knocked. Thud. Thud. I waited. From inside the house, deep within the dark interior, came a sound. Hish. Haha. It was a breath, heavy, wet. It sounded like a massive pair of lungs filling with fluid. It was the sound of a large animal waking up. I took a step back, my hand gripping the pizza bag so hard. My knuckles turned white. The mail slot at the bottom of the door creaked open. A pair of eyes appeared in the narrow rectangular gap. They were yellow, solid yellow, with no pupils. They glowed faintly in the gloom. Is it? Fresh. A voice whispered from the slot. It didn't sound human. It sounded like dry leaves scraping over concrete. Yeah, I stammered. Large pepperoni. No garlic. Gino sent me. Gino, the voice hissed. The fat one, he sends a proxy. Clever little meatball. A pale, elongated hand, too many knuckles. Fingers too long slid out of the mail slot. It was holding a single, tarnished silver coin. Do not accept a tip, I whispered to myself. It's prepaid, I said loudly, my voice cracking. I just need to leave the pizza. Take it, the voice commanded. The yellow eyes narrowed. Take the coin for your trouble for the crossing. No, I said, backing down a step. Store policy, no tips. The eyes widened. The yellow intensified. A low growl emanated from the door, vibrating the wood. Then feed me, the voice snarled. The mail slot slammed shut. The door didn't open. Instead, the wood of the door began to. It rippled like water. A hole formed in the center, widening into a mouth-like aperture, perfectly round and dark. Feed me. I stared at the hole. I looked at the pizza box. Slide it in, I thought. Just slide it in. I opened the bag. The pizza box was scorching hot. I pulled it out. The cardboard felt damp. I approached the door cautiously. The hole in the wood was just wide enough for the box. I shoved it through. As soon as the cardboard cleared the threshold, the hole snapped shut with a wet smack. The door was solid again. From inside, I heard a sound that will haunt me until I die. It wasn't the sound of eating. It was the sound of tearing, wet, violent ripping, like a pack of wolves tearing apart a deer. Snarls, crunches, and then a satisfied burp that shook the window panes. I turned and ran. I didn't care about looking cool. I sprinted back to the Civic, threw the empty bag onto the seat, and slammed the door. I locked it. Okay, one down. Let's get the hell out of here. I threw the car into drive and gunned it. The tires squealed this time, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet street. I drove down Oak Street looking for the turnoff, looking for the dirt road. I drove for a mile. Then too, the houses kept repeating. Yellow, blue, pink, yellow, blue, pink. I saw a gas station up ahead. An old Texaco with rusted pumps and a single light flickering overhead. I slowed down. Standing by the pumps was a figure. An old man in a grease-stained jumpsuit. He was wiping a wrench with a rag. I pulled up next to him, rolling down the window just a crack. "Hey," I yelled. "Hey, man. I'm lost. How do I get back to the highway?" The mechanic stopped wiping. He turned slowly toward me. His face was leathered, tanned like jerky. He smiled, revealing gums that were black with rot. But it was his eyes that made me freeze. He didn't have any. Where his eyes should have been, the skin was sewn shut with thick, black fishing wire. The stitches were crude, inflamed. "Leaving so soon, son?" the mechanic asked. His voice was pleasant, almost grandfatherly. "You can't leave. Not yet." "Why not?" I asked, my hand hovering over the gear shift. He pointed the greasy finger at the passenger seat, at the red bag. "Shift ain't over," he chuckled. "You still got deliveries to make." I looked at the bag. I had delivered the pizza. The bag should have been empty. But as I watched, the red nylon fabric bulged. It inflated. Something was filling it from the inside. I unzipped it slowly inside. Stacked neatly were 4 more pizza boxes. They were steaming, and on top of them lay a new receipt. Delivery to Hallows Creek Elementary. "The children are waiting, don't let them touch you." I looked back at the mechanic. He was still smiling. "Better hurry, son," he whispered. "Pizza gets cold. You get cold." He dragged a thumb across his throat. The streetlights above us flickered. Dot, dot, dash, dash. Dot. Morse code. RUN. "What do you mean shift isn't over?" I stammered, my voice sounding thin and pathetic inside the car. "I delivered the pizza. I'm done. I quit." The mechanic, Jeb, or at least that's what the embroidered patch on his greasy jumpsuit said, leaned closer. His eyeless face was inches from the glass. I could smell him through the crack in the window. He didn't smell like oil or gas. He smelled like formaldehyde and dried flowers. The smell of a funeral home. "Quittin' ain't an option in Hallows Creek, son," Jeb said softly. "The contract binds you. You stepped on the asphalt. You breathed the air. You knocked on the door. You're part of the ecosystem now." He tapped the glass with a blackened fingernail. "Click, click. Besides," he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "the manager don't like quitters. Last fellow who tried to quit, well, we're still fiending pieces of him in the storm drains." I swallowed hard. The manager. Jeb just chuckled, a dry rattling sound deep in his chest. He turned away and went back to polishing his wrench, as if our conversation was the most normal thing in the world. I looked at the bag again. 4 pizzas. 4 deliveries? How do I leave? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. After the deliveries, how do I get out? Jeb paused. He pointed down the road with the wrench. "Town hall," he said. "Last drop is always town hall. You feed the administration, they stamp your ticket, then the road opens. Until then, you're just running in circles." I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I floored it. The Civic lurching away from the gas station. I checked the rearview mirror. Jeb wasn't watching me leave. He was waving. A slow, stiff wave like an animatronic shutting down. I drove fast, my eyes scanning the repeating houses. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I glanced at the fuel gauge. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I filled up yesterday. The needle was buried below the red line. The low fuel light wasn't just on. It was pulsing, a slow, rhythmic throb of orange light. I looked back at the Texaco station. It was receding in the distance, shrinking into a pinprick of light. I couldn't go back there. I wouldn't. But the car was sputtering. The engine coughed, a violent shudder that shook the steering wheel. "Come on, you piece of junk," I pleaded, slamming my hand on the dash. "Don't die on me now," the car coasted. The power steering locked up. The headlights dimmed to a sickly yellow, then died completely. I rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. Silence rushed back in. That heavy, suffocating silence. I was stranded. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, listening to my own breathing. The darkness outside was absolute. The streetlights had stopped flickering. They were just out. The only light came from the dashboard, glowing faintly, and the thermal bag. It was glowing. A dull red emanation seeped through the nylon fabric. I looked at the receipt again. Delivery 2, Hallows Creek Elementary. I looked out the side window. Looming to my left, set back from the road behind a rusted chain-link fence, was a massive brick building. It looked like a fortress, dark, imposing, with gargoyles perched on the roofline. Above the double doors, in bronze letters that seemed to catch moonlight that shouldn't exist, it read, Hallows Creek Elementary. "Of course," I muttered. Of course I broke down right in front of it. I grabbed the bag. It was hot against my chest, a comforting warmth in the freezing car. I also grabbed the flashlight from my glove box, a heavy maglite I kept for self-defense. I stepped out of the car. The air was colder now. I could see my breath pluming in front of me. The smell of sulfur was stronger here, mixed with something else, chalk dust and wet wool. I walked toward the school. The gate was open, the chain hanging loose. As I crossed the threshold of the playground, the swing set to my right creaked. Scree! I shined my light over. The swings were moving back and forth gently. But there was no wind. I ignored it. I walked faster. I reached the double doors. They were glass, reinforced with wire mesh. I peered inside. The hallway was long and dark, lined with lockers. At the far end, a single light flickered. I tried the door, locked. I looked at the receipt. Use the janitor's key. It is under the mat. I looked down. There was a welcome mat that simply said go away. I lifted it with the toe of my sneaker. Beneath it sat a heavy iron key, cold and rusted. I picked it up. It felt greasy. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a loud clack. I pulled the door open and stepped inside. The smell of sawdust and old plastic hit me instantly. It was the smell of every school ID ever been in, but stale preserved. "Hello," I called out. My voice echoed down the hallway. "Pizza delivery." No answer. I started walking. My footsteps echoed loudly on the linoleum. I passed a classroom. The door was open. I shined my light inside. Rows of desks, small chairs. Sitting in the desks were children. I gasped, freezing in place. There were 20 of them. Boys in button-down shirts. Girls in pinafores. They sat perfectly still, hands folded on their desks, facing the chalkboard. But they weren't moving. They weren't breathing. I shined the light on the nearest boy. He was a mannequin. His skin was smooth, pale plastic. His eyes were painted on wide blue staring. His mouth was a simple painted line. "Just dolls," I whispered. "Creepy-ass dolls." I backed out of the room. I turned to continue down the hall. Behind me I heard a sound. Scrape. Like a chair being pushed back. I spun around, shining the light back into the classroom. The boy mannequin was gone from his desk. He was standing in the aisle, facing me. His painted eyes seemed to be looking directly into the flashlight beam. "Okay," I said, my voice rising an octave. "Nope, nope." I turned and walked faster. Scrape. Scrape, scrape. More chairs, more movement. I broke into a jog. The receipt said, "The children are waiting." "Where?" I hissed. "Where are you waiting?" "The cafeteria. Double doors." I pushed them open. The cafeteria was set up for lunch, long tables, trays, and sitting at the center table was a single, massive mannequin. It was the size of an adult, but dressed in child's clothes, a propeller beanie, and a comically small t-shirt that read "Big Boy." It had its hands out, palms up, waiting. Is that the customer? I approached the table. The mannequin's painted face was cracked, peeling away to reveal dark wood underneath. "Pizza," I said, slamming the box onto the table. "Here." I turned to leave. The cafeteria doors slammed shut. I spun back around. The Big Boy mannequin hadn't moved, but its head was now turned. It was looking at the pizza box. Then its mouth, the painted line, began to split. The plastic cracked audibly. A seam opened up. "Thank you." The voice was high-pitched, like a recording played too fast. "You're welcome," I yelled, running for the doors. I pushed against them. They wouldn't budge. The other mannequins, the children from the classroom, were filing into the cafeteria. They moved in a jerky, stop-motion way. Click step, they were surrounding me. "Tip?" the Big Boy asked. "Tip, the driver." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out something small and white. He threw it at me. It skittered across the floor and stopped at my feet. It was a tooth, a human molar with the root still attached. Bloody. The currency of Hallow's Creek, I realized. "Keep the change," I screamed. I threw my shoulder against the doors. They gave way. I burst into the hallway and sprinted. I didn't look back. I could hear the click step of plastic feet on linoleum behind me, gaining speed. I burst out the front doors into the cold night air. I didn't stop until I reached the dead Civic. I fumbled with the door handle, threw myself inside, and locked it. I looked out the window. Standing in the doorway of the school, silhouetted by the flickering hall light, were 20 small figures. They stood perfectly still, waving. I looked down at the thermal bag. 3 pizzas left, and the next receipt was already printing itself out of the dashboard air vent. Delivery 3, St. Jude's Church. Father Thomas is fasting. Slide the slices. Do not look at the confessional. I stared at the dashboard vent as the receipt curled out like a long, thin tongue. St. Jude's Church. My car was dead. I turned the key again, praying for a miracle. Click, click, click. Nothing. Just the mocking sound of a dead battery. I have to walk. I realized, the horror of the thought settling into my bones like ice water. I grabbed the thermal bag. It was heavier now. Every time a new receipt printed, the bag seemed to gain mass, as if the remaining pizzas were becoming denser, more real. I strapped the heavy maglite to my belt loop, grabbed the bag in one hand, and the tire iron from under my seat in the other. I stepped out of the car. The silence of the town was different now. It wasn't empty. It was attentive. The shadows between the houses seemed to stretch toward me. I started walking, according to the street signs. St. Jude's was 3 blocks down, an eternity in this place. I walked in the middle of the road, avoiding the sidewalks. I didn't want to be close to those dark, gaping porches. Block 1. A dog barked, but it sounded wrong. It sounded like a man shouting "woof" in a deep, guttural voice. I didn't look. Block 2. A curtain in a second-story window twitched. I saw a hand pale, with too many fingers pressed against the glass. Block 3. The church loomed ahead. It was an ancient stone structure, Gothic and imposing, with a steeple that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds. The stained glass windows were dark, but they didn't depict saints. Even in the gloom, I could see they depicted scenes of descent. People falling into pits. The front doors were massive oak slabs, bound in iron. I walked up the steps. The smell here was overpowering. Incense and rot. I checked the receipt. Father Thomas is fasting. Slide the slices. Do not look at the confessional. Okay, I whispered. Just slide them under. I approached the doors. There was a gap at the bottom, about 2 inches high. I knelt on the cold stone. I opened the pizza box. The cheese was bubbling, as if it had just come out of the oven. "Pizza delivery," I called out softly. From the other side of the door, close too close, came a low growl. It was a wet, rattling sound, like fluid in a throat. "Feed the flock," a voice gargled. I grabbed a slice. It burned my fingers. I slid it under the door. Something snatched it. Snatch, then a wet slurping sound. "Slurp, gulp, more," the voice demanded. I grabbed another slice. Slid it under, snatch. Slurp. I fell into a rhythm. Slide, snatch, slide, snatch. I was on the last slice when I heard it behind me. In the churchyard, crunch. Footsteps on gravel. I froze. I didn't turn around. "Father," I whispered to the door. "Is there someone else here?" The voice on the other side changed. It dropped the gargle. It became clear, terrified human speech. "Run, boy, he found you." The door shook violently, as if something massive on the inside had just slammed against it, terrified of what was outside. I dropped the empty box and spun around. Standing at the bottom of the steps, bathed in the moonlight, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall. Maybe 7 feet. It wore a suit, a cheap, polyester suit that looked like a Gino's uniform. But the fabric was wrong. It was textured. It was skin. The figure wore a mask. A smooth, featureless mask with no eyes, no nose, just a wide, smiling mouth filled with rows of needle-like teeth. It held a clipboard. "Arthur," it said. Its voice was smooth, corporate, soothing. "You're late," the manager. I scrambled backward, hitting the church door. I delivered it. I'm doing the job. The manager took a step up, his leg bent backward at the knee, like a dog's leg. "Performance review," he chuckled. "Efficiency is down. Customer satisfaction is lacking." He took another step. He was fast. I threw the tire iron. It hit him in the chest with a dull thud, bouncing off harmlessly. He didn't even flinch. "Strike one," the manager said. I looked around. I was trapped on the steps. Then I remembered the car keys. They were in my pocket. I reached for them. They weren't there. I patted my pockets frantically. Nothing. I looked down. They were lying on the stone step, right near the gap under the door. I lunged for them. At the same moment, a hand clawed. Gray hand shot out from under the church door and grabbed the keys. "Mine now," the gargling voice hissed from inside. "No," I screamed. The manager was 3 steps away. He reached out a long arm. I didn't think. I reacted. I grabbed the heavy thermal bag still holding 2 pizzas and swung it with everything I had. It connected with the manager's head. The heat of the pizzas, combined with the weight, staggered him. He stumbled back, his skin suit ripping at the shoulder. Underneath there was no blood. Just black, swirling smoke. "Strike 2, he snarled, the smooth voice breaking into static. I jumped the railing. It was a 10-foot drop to the grass below. I landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact. My ankle popped, sending a bolt of fire up my leg. "Run," I told myself. "Just run." I scrambled up and sprinted into the darkness of the churchyard. I weaved through the tombstones. The names on them were strange. Gino's Slice, Domino's, Pizza Hut. They were burying the restaurants or the drivers. I heard the manager behind me. He wasn't running. He was loping thump drag. Thump drag. I reached the road. My car was useless. My keys were gone. I looked at the receipt printing from the thermal bag itself now. Delivery 4. The town hall. The administration is starving. Time remaining. 4 minutes. Town hall. Jeb said it was the exit. I looked down the street. At the far end of Main Street, rising like a monolith, was a building with a clock tower. Town hall. It was half a mile away. I had a bad ankle. A monster chasing me. And 4 minutes. "I can make it," I gasped, limping into a run. "I have to make it." I ran. My breath burned in my lungs. The sulfur air tasted like fire behind me. The manager let out a sound. It wasn't a roar. It was a siren. A tornado siren emanating from his throat. Woo! Lights in the houses began to flick on. The town was waking up. Doors opened. People's shadows stepped onto their porches. They watched me run. They pointed. Courier, they whispered. Fresh meat. I kept running. 3 minutes. 2 blocks to go. Town hall loomed closer, but standing in front of it, blocking the entrance, were 2 figures. Jeb the mechanic and the big boy mannequin. They stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Shift's almost over, son, Jeb called out, raising his wrench. Time to clock out. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I reached into the bag. I grabbed the next pizza box. It was labeled Special Delivery, the obstacles. I didn't know what that meant. But I knew one thing about pizza. It's hot. I ripped the box open. I took the pizza out with my bare hands. It seared my skin, blistering my palms instantly. I screamed in pain, but I held on. I ran straight at them. Order up, I yelled. I flung the molten cheese and dough at Jeb's face. It hit him square in the eyeless sockets. The cheese stuck. It burned. Jeb screamed a high human scream. He fell back, clawing at his face. The mannequin lunged. I swung the empty thermal bag, catching it in the plastic knees. It shattered. I dove past them, rolling onto the steps of Town Hall. I looked up. The doors were open. But inside there was no lobby, no offices, just a pit. A massive swirling vortex of black energy in the center of the floor. Delivery 4, the Town Hall. Feed the administration. I looked at the bag. 1 pizza left. I looked behind me. The manager was at the bottom of the steps. He was smiling. His suit was torn, revealing the void beneath. Performance review complete, he said. Termination imminent. He reached for me. I looked at the pit. I looked at the pizza. Eat this, I screamed. I threw the entire bag pizza, and all into the vortex. The bag tumbled through the air. The manager lunged. The bag hit the black swirl. Foom. A shockwave of white light exploded from the pit. It hit the manager, vaporizing his skin suit instantly. He dissolved into smoke. It hit me. The world went white. Then silence. Then sound. Scree. Siege. The sound of a thermal printer. I opened my eyes. I was sitting in my car. The engine was running. The radio was playing a pop song. I was parked in the lot of Gino's slice. It was raining. I looked at the clock. 3:05 a.m. 5 minutes had passed. "In back," I whispered. "In back." I looked at my passenger seat. The thermal bag was gone. I looked at my hands. They were blistered, red and raw from the hot cheese. I laughed. A manic, broken laugh. I turned off the car. I walked to the shop door. "Gino," I yelled. "I did it. I want my money." I tried the door locked. I peered through the glass. The shop was dark, but it wasn't just dark. It was empty. Dust covered the counters. The tables were gone. The floor was cracked and covered in debris. It looked like it had been closed for 20 years. I stepped back, confused. I looked at the sign on the door. "Closed by order of the Health Department, 1998. "No," I whispered. "I was just here. Gino was just here." I looked at my reflection in the glass. I wasn't wearing my street clothes anymore. I was wearing a suit. A polyester suit. It felt tight. It felt textured. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a slip of paper. It was a receipt. New manager assigned, Arthur. Shift start. Immediate. Territory. Everywhere. I looked at my hands again. The blisters were fading. My skin was smoothing out. Becoming plastic. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a low mechanical hum. The printer inside the abandoned shop started to screech. A new ticket was printing. I unlocked the door. I walked inside. I had a delivery to assign. If you enjoyed this delivery to the unknown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps the lights on at Gino's. Let me know in the comments below if you received a pizza delivery at 3 a.m. from a town that didn't exist. Would you eat it? Or would you slide it back under the door? I'll be reading your answers. Until next time, check your receipts.